And I'll tell you what, there has to be more than one person in helping cover up this crime. No doubt about it.
Well, cover-ups can be deliberate, and cover-ups can be a matter of outright negligence. Let's just put it this way: the district attorney, Alex Hunter, was known for being the most liberal district attorney in the United States of America. Now, I myself am not the most prosecutorially minded forensic pathologist, coroner, medical examiner in America, and I testify for the defense most of the time outside my own jurisdiction, where I'm always testifying for the prosecution. So I just want to make that prefatory comment before I make this statement, that if you're going to be a district attorney, then be a district attorney. It is your role to prosecute. Well, guess what the cop-out plea in Boulder, Colorado was under Alex Hunter for each of those years? Just take a guess. In other words, cases that never went to trial. Take a guess.
Evidence?
Just cases that
tainted.
Were brought, criminal cases of all kinds, petty robbery, burglary, armed robbery, armed burglary. This was the only murder, by the way, which is another interesting point.
Ever in Boulder. Unbelievable, isn't it?
The Boulder police were no more qualified to handle this homicide investigation than I would be, just because I have an MD degree, to go in and do coronary bypass surgery on somebody. There's a specialty, which Jeff is well aware of, and you say, they didn't call in the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. They didn't call in the Denver homicide detectives, who are so skilled and competent and experienced. They handled it themselves, and I repeat, this was the only homicide in the entire city of Boulder that year, and maybe one or two in each of the preceding years. But getting back to Alex Hunter, well, I'll tell you what his cop-out rate was about 99%. In other words, of all the cases in Boulder, Alex Hunter found it necessary only to go to trial for about 1% or so. Does that give you an idea what kind of a district attorney he is? So he buys into it. You've already talked about the fact you're dealing with a multi-millionaire.
Right.
And then you talk about, we already touched upon the fact that these attorneys were brought in, and then they immediately reach out and they grab other people, former FBI profilers. They reach out for other people in DNA, and so in other words,
a lot of money.
Kind of preempt the field.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Well, the money is one thing. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's a game that I'm well familiar with. I've been involved in that. I know how that game is played. You reach out and you get the top experts on your side. You follow me? And then you have the coroner out there. He does the autopsy, and now we get to the autopsy. You want to talk about that?
Well, doctor, a real quick question about before we get into that.
Yeah.
With the autopsy, obviously I'm jumping ahead of ourselves here a little bit, but what came out, I guess, Patsy Ramsey's, she passed away, and then was it was after that this prosecutor came out and said they apologized to the Ramseys for putting them through this.
Yes, that was the former district attorney. You're quite right. She's now out of that office. There's a new district attorney, and the question is, and I don't know just how serious they are and what they're doing about it. They're supposedly looking into the case, but what you just said, Jeff, you're right. That former district attorney came out and apologized. She said that there was something new with DNA. There's nothing new. What she talked about was just a how shall I say, some slight improvement on DNA in terms of being able to do the testing with a more minute amount of material.
That's the question I had. Supposedly,
and I've discussed this with Henry Lee and other people and so on. The fact that they found some DNA in the underwear. Well, guess what? Next time you get a package of newly purchased underwear or socks or shirt, you take it in somewhere as a little test if you want to spend the money, and if you don't find somebody's DNA in there, what do you think? It's all handled by there's no human beings in there.
So you're talking, Dr. Wecht, you're talking about this unknown DNA that they brought out. I remember reading that. I read about that, and I saw the news that there was supposedly unknown male DNA found.
Yeah. In other words, everything that took place in the basement, all of that contact, all of that physical contact, putting the rope around her neck, putting the rope around her right wrist, doing everything of that perverse nature, et cetera. And I want to talk more about that if we have time.
Yeah, I was going to say, go ahead, Dr.
All
Wecht.
of that was accomplished without any transfer of any kind of biological material of the most minute nature that would have permitted DNA testing to be done. But then they came up with something years later on the underwear, and they said, aha, this proves that there was a DNA. What it proves is that somebody packaging the underwear in the Philippines or Japan or China, that's what it proves. That's what it
Definitely
proves.
not in Thailand, like the guy that came forward and said he was the guy that did this to get out of.
John Mark Carr.
And
that was a big farce, Dr. Wecht.
Oh,
Why did they give this guy that much
An
publicity?
absolute disgrace.
It was a disgrace. You're absolutely right. CNN and everybody covering this.
I was out of town. In fact, it was interesting. We'll talk about this another time. In New Orleans, talking about all of the deaths that occurred in Memorial Hospital. There's an interesting case for the future, guys. But anyway, and I landed, and I see a whole barrage of reporters, the TV people out there at the airport. I said, what's going on here? And they said, oh, the case has been solved. We know what happened, and we know what happened. And John Mark Kerr, he has been found to be the murderer of the little girl. And I said it from the beginning, this is the biggest bunch of nonsense that I've ever heard. This is absolutely absurd. No way in the world. And think what a disgrace it is to have said that he ran. And I mean, but this gives you an idea of what they will do out there. They will go to any lengths, those people who are interested for all their reasons in covering up. And I'm not suggesting any kind of grand conspiracy in the sense that people sat down and said, okay, this is what we're going to do and so on. But I mean a cover-up more based upon now personal pride, professional pride, failure to have done what they were supposed to have done, and so on. That's what I'm talking about.
Cyril, this is a two-parter. We'll be back later on for part two. This is the first time we've ever gone two parts because this is such an extraordinary case. In the remaining 30 to 45 seconds, and again, then we'll pick up in part two next week. Could you tell us why that Steve Thomas, the police officer who wrote a book, why his publisher kind of folded and settled with the Ramseys?
Well, you know, they leaned on Steve Thomas terribly, and they tried to ridicule him and disgrace him in every single way, and they drummed him out of the chorus, so to speak. They did everything that they possibly could because Steve Thomas had the courage and the professional decency and ethics to talk about this thing in a sense of reality. Yeah, it was disgraceful, just disgraceful what they did to Steve Thomas. Yeah.
So we're down to our last few seconds. Will you come back for part two?
Yeah, I'll be pleased to.
Absolutely. That'll do it from Right From the Author. For Jeff Hansen, I'm Joe Cochran. Thank you to Cyril Wecht. Don't forget, part two of this will be coming up in the future. We'll see you next time on Right From the Author.